After so long, I finally got around to watching Ahsoka, and this is going to be the deep dive. This is where we're going to be going through every single episode of Ahsoka, talking about what I like, talking about the story, talking about the visuals. We're going to be diving into everything Ahsoka in this spoiler episode. So if you have not watched Ahsoka and you don't want to know any spoilers, I know I'm very late to the video, but I want to give the warning anyways. We're going to get into it in just a second. Before we do, though, I do want to say hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I am your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's talk about Ahsoka. So guys, the first thing that I do want to mention about this is I have not watched Star Wars Rebels, but the Star Wars Clone Wars has been my favorite thing that Star Wars has put out in literally the history of Star Wars. So I don't know why it took me so long to watch Ahsoka. I've been very excited for Ahsoka. I love Ahsoka, one of my favorite Star Wars characters ever. But it probably did take a little bit away from me that I have not seen Star Wars Rebels, because of course I know that there's some characters that came about there. I just didn't know who they were. I watched like a 20-minute episode on like things you need to know before Ahsoka. You know, I've watched one of those videos, but so I still really enjoyed it, man. I still enjoyed it. I didn't like it nearly as much as I thought I would, but I really did like it. So let's dive into Ahsoka. So the series starts off with Baylan Skoll being told that Ahsoka is searching for Grand Admiral Thrawn. Now, I also didn't know if Thrawn was somebody from Rebels. I didn't take in a lot of information from that first video that I watched, but it didn't really end up mattering because actually, I get the hype behind Baylan. He's a really cool character. But after that, we are introduced to Ahsoka, and Ahsoka looks great. I know there were a lot of people really having problems with the actor for Ahsoka. Didn't really fit the cartoon. I thought she was great. I thought she portrayed a great version of an older Ahsoka. And yeah, you know what? She wasn't exactly, what do you call it? Like, she wasn't the happy girl that was ready to fight in the Clone Wars. This is obviously an Ahsoka who's, I don't want to say depressed. It's a different version of Ahsoka. I really liked her. I really liked the girl who played her. So I know there's a lot of controversy with that, but I had absolutely 100% no issue with it. So Ahsoka comes in. We get a really cool fight scene. She has some lightsabers that we've never seen before. She finds a star map, which has a location, but she ends up being told by the green lady, you know, the green lady that we've seen all the memes about. I don't know if that's just me, but it ends up being locked. So she has to ask Sabine for help. And this is where I was a little bit confused because, again, I didn't know who Sabine was. And I got to say, while I did really, really like Ahsoka, I didn't like Sabine. I didn't like her. She had a bad attitude and nothing was fun about her. I don't know. It's just, I don't know if that's common knowledge, but I didn't really like her at all. So she asks Sabine to help her with this. Sabine takes it back to her own place, and she gets stolen from the droids. She ends up getting stabbed, and actually, while I was sitting there, I was like, oh, okay, we're done with Sabine now. I thought she was actually dead, but I should have known. I don't know why. I should have known, but then we're brought into the next episode where she survives, and Ahsoka traveled to a shipyard to find out that people were actually building a hyperdrive for the Galactic Empire because they really wanted to find Grand Admiral Thrawn. Now, we all know what happened after Ahsoka, right? We know that there were still people loyal to the Galactic Empire, and it was a really cool scene, honestly. This is the problem that I'm having really dissecting Ahsoka, because it kind of moves really fast, and it's kind of, everything that happened is a little bit linear. Like, there's not too much to really dive into except for like one little bit of an area. But other than that, after they have that entire mission, they have like a little bit of a fight scene. They end up getting away, but Sabine ends up being ready to be Ahsoka's Padawan again. I'm sitting here, I'm like, as much as I like Ahsoka, Sabine, I want nothing to do with you. But I was like, I was kind of accepting the fact that she was going to be part of this. So Ahsoka, actually, and it's really cool to see her in this scenario, by the way. I don't know if that's what happened in Star Wars Rebels, but I really, really liked seeing Ahsoka in that kind of leadership role. You could see Ahsoka was still a little bit damaged to herself, and Sabine was having a really, really hard time using the Force because she's not as sick as Ahsoka, right? But anyways, like, we have some pretty nice scenes there. Ahsoka is getting into training mode, and it's, again, really interesting to see Ahsoka in such a different kind of level like that she is. She's essentially a different kind of girl now. So like I said, everything ended up moving on a little bit quick there because they end up traveling to that planet where the bad guys are, and their ship ends up getting shot down, so they end up trapped on that planet. While they're getting shot down, and when they crash land, it is revealed that, and I had to write this down actually, it's on my notes over here, the Eye of Sion, which was a hyperspace ring designed to travel to another galaxy, and that's where Thrawn was trapped. I didn't remember that's what it was called when I was making a couple notes for this entire video. I had to particularly write down the Eye of Sion. I've never heard about that before, And I completely missed it, to be honest with you. I missed it in this entire part of them talking about Ahsoka, right? So then when the show starts picking up a little bit, because Ahsoka ends up reaching Balon, they have a duel, and then Ahsoka kind of gets her butt kicked and she falls into the ocean, right? And I obviously sitting here, I was wondering throughout this Ahsoka series if Ahsoka was actually going to end up dying. But so early in the series, when she just loses a duel and falls into the ocean, we don't see exactly what happens to her. I was like, oh no, this isn't her time yet. So I actually don't know, too, if they're going to continue Ahsoka and have a season 2. I wasn't sure if Ahsoka was going to live through this. That's kind of where I was at. Anyways, while we are waiting to see actually what happened with Ahsoka, we have Sabine, who's like, oh my god, you just killed Ahsoka, what are you doing? But then Balon ends up manipulating her into coming with them because he will lead her to his friend, and she won't be a prisoner, but surprise, she ends up actually being a prisoner while they travel to want to go see Thrawn, right? But this is where Ahsoka awakens between the world between worlds, they called it, and Anakin Skywalker is revealed. I feel like I would have liked this whole series so much more, because I'm a big spoiler guy. When there's something that I know I like to watch, I stay away from I stay away from spoilers. I hit not interested in like absolutely everything related to it. But I was spoiled about this. I feel like I would have liked this series so much more if I wasn't, because I knew it was coming. I didn't know when, but I assumed it would be now, like once we saw Ahsoka awaken in this weird world. Which sucks, because Anakin Skywalker, I've talked about this for so long, I believe he is one of the best written fictional characters in the history of storytelling. I love Anakin Skywalker, I love his actor, and it was really, really cool to see him back again, and it would have been this Tobey Maguire coming in Spider-Man type thing, seeing Andrew Garfield again. It really could have been like that. Please let me know down below if it hit the same for you, because I just saw it everywhere when Ahsoka came out, man. There was absolutely no avoiding it, and I was really disappointed about that, because I would have been hyped. I would have been absolutely 100% hyped. So, getting back to the story, Anakin ends up explaining to Ahsoka that he has been watching her through the Force, and I was always confused, because while I do love Star Wars, I have never really been like super ultra into the lore of Star Wars. So when people die, did they kind of become Force spirits like Anakin and then end up doing what he was doing, like watching over Ahsoka through the Force, so they become part of the Force? If anybody could honestly explain that in the comment section, that would mean a lot to me if you would take the time to do that, so thank you. But anyways, like I said, Anakin was watching her through the Force and ends up telling Ahsoka that her loss against Balon was due to her unresolved guilt over the events that ended up driving them apart. So then they end up having a weird duel, which is kind of like, I would imagine this is more of like fan service than just actual storytelling, but hey, I'm totally here for it. I know people get annoyed at that type of stuff, but to see Anakin and Ahsoka fighting in the world between worlds gets me like really, really hyped up. But Ahsoka, of course, ends up losing the duel, and I love the graphics here. I love the visuals. It was absolutely beautiful. So she ends up reliving fragments of her past during the events of the Clone Wars, different fights there, and I love what they did here. They made her small, they made her a kid again, and the actress they chose for her was absolutely perfect. Again, no problems with the actors here. Loved them. It was really cool to see Ahsoka like, oh my god, we're in the Clone Wars, and that's another thing that I got spoiled for too, man. I ended up getting spoiled for that because the memes that came from it, where it's like, hey, my future kid in 10 years from now, this is the Clone Wars. Like, you know, it's like, yeah, I have a daughter coming into the world in a couple months, and if she ends up liking some of the stuff that I do, I will absolutely be sitting here down and watching the Clone Wars, because some of my greatest memories of my childhood was when season 1 of the Clone Wars came out, and I watched it with my mom as the episodes came out. I loved it. I would love to create that memory with my daughter, assuming that she ends up liking this stuff. I'm not going to like force her to like anything, of course, but it's just funny. Like, hey, what is this? Dad, what is this? We're in the Clone Wars. Like, that's it. So that's part of the reason probably why I didn't end up loving this series as much as I should have, because I'm a big fan of Ahsoka. I am. It's just these giant reveals that were supposed to happen, or like, I knew this was coming. That's the problem. I knew this stuff was coming, so it kind of killed the hype for me, right? So anyways, getting back to the story, Ahsoka ends up worrying that her legacy will only be one of fighting, which is an understandable thing to worry about, but she also believes that Anakin reaching out and teaching her will include his Darth Vader half, so she's a little bit reluctant to trust him, because of course, like, she didn't believe in the Clone Wars and then found out that he did all these horrible, horrible things, and they end up dueling again within the Clone Wars thing, and it was really cool to see them being part of that again, just those two together. It was just really awesome. So They continue fighting, but after so much time, she finally understands that she was not involved in the downfall of Anakin. So Ahsoka ends up choosing to live and continue fighting. Now, this part was a little bit weird to me because, like, I don't know. How could Ahsoka possibly think that she was part of Anakin's downfall? Because she's been nothing but supportive to him. Then again, it could be because she left the Jedi and Anakin could have been angry about that. That's literally the only thing I can draw to that. But no matter what, Anakin always loved her, right? Anakin always looked after her as his own. I don't think it was correct to believe that. You know what I mean? So when Ahsoka chooses to continue living and fighting, she ends up we end up with a scene, back with Sabine, and shocker, Sabine, she's surprised that she's been taken prisoner. But anyways, after that, so the Eye of Sion, had to look at that again, arrives on the planet, which was the ancient homeworld of Elsbeth's people, and the Night Sisters are reintroduced, which I loved the arc of the Night Sisters in the Clone Wars, so this is really cool. And I gotta say, I loved the kind of, the scenery here. It seemed so, like, doom and gloom. I just thought it was really cool, man. It was really cool to see the Night Sisters back again. It's nice to see their magic. It's just, fans of the Clone Wars, I believe they did a good job here, right? So anyways, Thrawn ends up arriving and provides Bridger's whereabouts to Sabine, and that's pretty much all Sabine cares about. And to be honest with you, I thought it was a little bit shocking that they let her go, but then I was like, oh my god, I'm so stupid, they ended up following her, right? But anyways, she ends up reuniting with this character, and I imagine that this character is somebody from Star Wars Rebels, a whole storyline there that, again, one of the problems why I didn't enjoy this series as much as I should have is because these two characters coming together meant absolutely nothing for me. I was almost disinterested in their story a little bit, to be honest with you, but it comes from me not liking Sabine and not caring about this new guy. This new guy's so smart, right? I just didn't really care for it. But anyways, something that I didn't talk about, and there wasn't really too much to talk about because a lot of the story was a little bit linear, right? The Green Lady ended up getting in trouble because she wasn't following orders, and the only reason that I'm mentioning this is because C-3PO came back in to save her. And I gotta say, C-3PO doesn't really stack up with the graphics to today's standards, but I did like that they kept C-3PO as like the same way that they ended up doing. But anyways, we get a little bit of a scene after that with Sabine ending up to actually tap into the Force a little bit because that's how Ahsoka finds her. Ahsoka starts speaking with her, so we know Sabine is working on the Force a little bit more, right? So after that, we're preparing because they're expecting Ahsoka's arrival through the Force. Elsbeth is gifted what's called Mother's Talzan sword to use it to confront the Jedi. So now she has a really cool weapon. She's all fancy, ready to go. So they get to the ship eventually after everything. Ahsoka reunites with everybody, and they have a cool fight with the Night Sisters constantly reviving the Night Troopers that are always attacking them. And I really love this fight scene. I loved Ahsoka Sabine working together. I loved that no matter what they did, it kind of felt like your typical zombie apocalypse type thing, right? Where these things, you keep killing them, but then they keep getting up. I'm a big fan of the Night Sisters, okay? I really, really like them from the Clone Wars, man. So after that, of course, Sabine ends up actually being able to tap into the Force because they want to get into that ship. So she uses the Force to get Bridger onto the ship, and we have this really cool scene where Ahsoka's kind of getting surrounded, right? But it's revealed to us later that Sabine actually ended up staying with Ahsoka, so Bridger ended up getting onto that ship. They have a really cool fight scene with Sabine and Ahsoka. They end up killing Elsbeth, and I wish I could dive a little bit more into this fight, but there wasn't all that much to it. It was cool that Sabine stayed behind. I assumed that Ahsoka was going to win here. The Eye of Sion ended up jumping into hyperspace and ended up leaving everybody stranded. Skull is then, and this is where I was a little bit confused about the story, to be honest with you. He was guided to a mountain, and that mountain, I had to write this down as well. They was guided to a mountain by a statue of the Mortis gods, and this, I'm guessing, was part of Star Wars Rebels as well, because I didn't really understand what that meant. Regardless, it was really cool to see. I really like Balon, man. He's a fascinating character, but the series came to a halt after Elsbeth's death because Ahsoka and the gang end up making their new home on that planet. And what was really cool with the story ending was we find out that Ahsoka is still being watched over Anakin's spirit. I really, really like this. And maybe the reason why I didn't have nearly as much to talk about as I typically do with these, like I know my Better Call Saul reviews have been like an hour long, but it was like, 8 episodes, and there was a lot of fighting in there. There was, again, it was a little bit of a linear story in my opinion, but It was super cool to see the Night Sisters. It was super cool to see Ahsoka in the Clone Wars again. It was super cool to see Ahsoka back in general. And it was super cool to see Anakin. And at the end, I'm glad they ended off with Anakin watching over, because we know Anakin truly, truly cares about her. I really like this entire series. I hope they continue it on. Maybe I should watch Star Wars Rebels. Maybe that would make the rest of the series mean a little bit more to me. But regardless, I really, really enjoyed it for what it was. This was a long time coming, guys. I loved Ahsoka. I thought it was great. Really cool seeing her again. I can't believe there was controversy on the actor, but hey, let me know what you think down below, guys. But I have to ask you, before you go, I have to ask you, did you like any 2000s cartoons? If so, I made a tier list ranking every cartoon that I've watched personally from the 2000s. Check it out, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Take care.